Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 29. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be discussing a Power Trip Corvinight team. This team concept was something that I was throwing around all the way back in Regulation C, but I couldn't really make it work out back then, so I ended up bringing a different team to a regional, and I'm glad that I brought that different team because the Power Trip Corviknight would not have worked out. But that's another story for another day, and today we're talking about this Corviknight. And this Corviknight, in case you don't know what Power Trip does, is that it gains plus 20 power for each of your user's stat boost. And the general way that you use Corviknight in this format is with the Body Press, which takes your defense stat into calculation. Because Corviknight has a very high defense stat, we can afford to do a lot of damage, and we can Iron Defense to pretty much make us an invincible physical tank, especially since we have the Roost and our leftovers in order to heal ourselves. But once we Iron Defense to plus 6, Power Trip is also going to be at a pretty good amount of base power. Since it'll be a 140 base power move, and nothing in the game resists Power Trip, so it's a really nice move to have on Corviknight, just in case we get into an endgame where we have to Body Press into a Ghost type. We can Power Trip into it instead, and Power Trip will be super effective. And for Corviknight, we're going to be using the Mirror Armor ability, since we can afford to reflect things such as Intimidates back onto the Intimidate users, or we can get rid of special defense drops that might come from things like Shadow Ball back onto the user. But not having our stat drops because of our Mirror Armor ability is super crucial on the Corviknight. And lastly, we're just going with the Terra Dragon, since Dragon gives us it resists all of the things that we were previously weak to, and Dragon has a lot of nice resistances. Up next, we have Hisuian Quillfish here. Hisuian Quillfish fits this strategy quite well because it can use the move Acupressure, which gives a random stat boost to an ally of up to 2, and it can even include things such as accuracy and evasion, and if we get evasion on Corviknight, then we are omega cooking at that point. But getting any of the plus 2s, except for defense on Corviknight, since it's super easy for us to build defense on Corviknight, any of those are a stat boost are absolutely fine from the Acupressure. And we have other good supporting moves in the Taunt in order to taunt things that want to go for like Trick Room, for example, since this team can kind of struggle inside of Trick Room since a lot of the pieces are on the faster side. But we also have the Pain Split to hopefully live like 2 attacks with Hisuian Quillfish, and then we can Pain Split an opponent, or if Corviknight is low on health and Hisuian Quillfish is high on health, we can side Pain Split into Corviknight in order to get Corviknight back in the game. And lastly, we're going to be using a Destiny Bond just as kind of a last resort closed team sheet option, where if we really need to get something off the field and it's likely that they're going to KO Quillfish, we can hopefully get off a Destiny Bond, and that either prevents them from trying to KO Quillfish or trying to go for a spread move that would KO Quillfish. And on the Hisuian Quillfish, we're going to be using Intimidate to lower the attack of things, and we're going with the Terra type of Grass, so that we're not getting put to sleep by Amoonguss, but also Grass resists Ground, which is the only weakness that Hisuian Quillfish has, and we're not a fully evolved Pokemon because Overquill exists, so we get to run the Eviolite item. Up next, we got Smeargle, and Smeargle is just here to do gimmicky closed team sheet things, as we have the Spore in order to put the opponent to sleep, and we have Fake Out in order to flinch them for a turn, and we have the Decorate, which is Alchemy's signature move, but Smeargle gets to copy it, because Smeargle gets to copy pretty much everything. But Decorate gives an attack boost and a special attack boost to the Pokemon that we target, which is good on everything on this team, but it's really crucial on Corviknight, because not only does it give us a plus 2 attack boost for Power Trip, but it also increases Power Trip's base power by an 80 base power every time we use Decorate on Corviknight, which is great. And then I decided to use Technician on this Smeargle just because I didn't want the variability of Moody, since it is kind of likely that we're going to need Smeargle to be on the field for a while, since we're going for things like Spore and Side Decorate into our Pokemon. I really didn't want to get like a Moody speed drop or a Moody that makes it so that Smeargle ends up like just getting taken out of the game. And again, we're going with a Terra type of Grass, so that way Smeargle can't be put to sleep, and we're using the Focus Sash to make it so that Smeargle can at least live one hit. Up next, we have Palmont, and Palmont is the main way that we're going to be countering rain teams, especially Pelipper rain teams, as Palmont is a very good lead into something that wants to be like Pelipper or Archaludon, because it either makes Archaludon Terra or it just makes Pelipper leave, since we have both Electric type and Fighting type Stab, and our Electric type Stab is especially crucial here because we have Double Shock, which will make us typeless after we use it, which is pretty nice for dealing with Pokemon like ground types. And we're running the Terra Electric on Palmont, so if we have to Double Shock more than once, since once you Double Shock and lose your Electric typing, you can't use it again, unless you are Electric Terrestrialization, because Terrestrialization types cannot be changed by even things like Soak, so it applies for you using your own moves like Double Shock. You can just Double Shock infinitely while you're Terra Electric, which is really nice. And we also have the Nuzzle for paralyzing things, as it makes it easier for Corviknight to have more longevity, and if we're getting Paraturns on Pokemon, that means Corviknight is more likely to go for Roost and be able to pull out the game that way. And we also have the coaching, mostly for Corviknight, but also Excadrill likes it because Excadrill is a physical attacker who can be kind of bulky, but also Hippowdon likes it, since actually I don't think we have a physical move on Hippowdon. We'll get there, but I don't think we do. And we're going to be using Natural Cure on Palmont, just because if Palmont falls asleep, it's nice to be able to swap it out into another Pokemon that we have, and then it'll wake up, and then we can bring it back out on the field, and it'll be awake again, but it also helps with burns. We're going to be running the Covert Cloak on Palmont so that we're not getting faked out, since Palmont is pretty fast, and if we can get a coaching off into Corviknight, it makes it that much tankier and harder to deal with. Speaking of fast mons, we got Excadrill here, and our Excadrill is going to be running the Sand Rush. Since Hippowdon is a Sandstream mon, it's super easy for us to get up sand on this team, and a lot of Pokemon on this team benefit from sand, mostly just Corviknight and Excadrill, since they're both steel types and they don't really care about the sand chip ticking away at them. But it also helps us to deal with rain teams, and we have just good coverage moves in the Drill Run, Rock Slide, and Iron Head, but Ground Rock and Steel cover, like, good hits into pretty much everything that Corviknight was weak to previously, so it's nice to have Excadrill here to support Corviknight. And we're going Terra Ghost so that we're not getting faked out, and we're Clear Amulet so that we're not getting intimidated. And lastly, we have the Hippowdon, who can be super helpful in breaking down opposing Pokemon that are trying to set up on us, because we have the Whirlwind, which can force the random ally to switch. So if we think there's going to be a Trick Room setup, we can Whirlwind into that Pokemon, because Whirlwind is higher priority than Trick Room, so that automatically gets rid of the Trick Room. But if something is going to try and set up on us, like a Volcarona or an Annihilape, we can Whirlwind them out, and then they're just going to waste their turn, because the stats go away whenever you switch. And then we're going to be running the Scorching Sands, because Scorching Sands has a 30% chance to burn the target, which is pretty neat. But in case we're not trying to go for burn, we can go for Yawn, which when there's only 2 Pokemon left on the field and we go for Yawn, it means that Pokemon is guaranteed to fall asleep. And so many things are safety goggles to avoid falling asleep, but Yawn is definitely something that you have to respect in this strategy, because just clicking Yawn twice and then putting the opposing Pokemon to sleep, it's so good. And I went with Agua Berry, since Hippowdon is a pretty physically tanky Pokemon, and hopefully we only have to use it into physical attackers, but we can use it into special attackers to still take a pretty decent hit. And I went with Terra Normal on Hippowdon, because I wasn't really sure where to place the Terra Normal, but Normal at least makes it so that you're only weak to fighting, and we have a bunch of other things on this team to deal with most of the fighting types. But Normal lets us catch off guard ghost types who wanted to previously Shadow Ball into Hippowdon. We can just be immune to them and then click Yawn into them and then protect, and then they're forced to fall asleep, and then Hippowdon can maybe Scorching Sands them down, hopefully. But yeah, that's the basis of how the team works. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have a Pelipper Rain team, and they have the Goldango, and they have a lot of disruption tools, and Grimmsnarl and Cineroar, and Amoonguss, so yeah, we'll see how this one plays out. They start Pelipper and Archaludon, and we start Palmont every time here, I believe, and we also start Excadrill, and I wanted them to hit Palmont because it's pretty crucial there, or bait out a Terra from the Archaludon, but the Archaludon just dies in one hit there to our Drill one, which is pretty nice, as the Weather Ball that is now Rock is no longer going to KO Excadrill by any means. And now Amoonguss is going to hit the field, and they're going to try and intimidate, but Excadrill is Clear Amulet, as Amoonguss goes for the Terra Water, and I kind of thought that they would try to sleep into Excadrill, and they do, so we get the sleep into Amoonguss, so Amoonguss either puts Excadrill to sleep, or it falls asleep itself, and they don't want Amoonguss to fall asleep, so they bring back their Weather Rain, and they fake out Excadrill, and Hippowdon is going to get a free Scorching Sands into Incineroar to do a good bit of chip into it. And now we're going to bring in Corviknight, as we're just Rock Sliding to get good damage into both Mons, since it's super effective into both Mons, and Excadrill is going to go down here finally. Well, we flinched Incineroar, which is nice there, which I'm not really sure what it would have done, but now we get to bring in Palmont, and Palmont does not fear going for double shock into anything at this point because there's nothing to resist it, and Corviknight is going to start getting set up with the body presses, and Amoonguss is very clearly the most intimidating target here, so we just decide to Terra Electric and take it out with the double shock, and body press isn't going to do too much damage into Pelipper, but Mirror Armor is going to reflect that Intimidate back onto Incineroar to make Incineroar even less useless here, as Hippowdon is going to bring back the Sand, and they fake out into Corviknight just to do damage into it. And Rock Weather Ball isn't going to be stabbed, so it's not going to be do too much damage into Corviknight, as everything on the field takes Sand Chip other than our two Mons who don't take Sand Chip. And the opponent forfeits because they really don't have a way to break Corviknight at this point. Okay, here we have some Whimsicott Tailwind with a lot of fearsome Mons. And I wasn't quite sure how to address the lead into this, but they lead Incineroar and Whimsicott, and we led Palmont, Corviknight, and this lead isn't so bad for Corviknight because we can reflect the Intimidate. But Whimsicott's going to go for Terra Ghost immediately, perhaps predicting a Fake Out, but the Incineroar has Will-O-Wisp, which is kind of annoying, because being burned on Corviknight is like the main thing that counters Corviknight, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So I just decided to bring in Hisui and Quillfish here to take the burn rather than Corviknight taking the burn, as we can hopefully try to get rid of Incineroar. And Close Combat is going to do a decent amount of damage to it, another one will finish it off, but they've used their Ghost Terra on Whimsicott, so we don't really have to fear Incineroar going for the Terra, but they Parting Shot out with the Tailwind, and we Close Combat uselessly into a Dragapult now that we're locked into it. But we taunt into Whimsicott, and Whimsicott's going to be forced to do something. And we get the natural cure to our burn away as they Dragon Darts both Mons, but Corviknight is able to resist it. And they Moonblast into Quillfish, and it does a decent amount of damage, but we get to Acupressure Corviknight once, and we get Accuracy, which is probably the most useless one, as all of Corviknight's moves are 100% accurate, but we at least have a little bit for Power Trip there, as they Moonblast into Corviknight, and I try to just go for the Power Trip to see how much damage it'll do to Whimsicott, and I also didn't want Whimsicott to, I didn't want to Iron Defense with Corviknight quite yet. We Spore into Dragapult here, so that at least gets to go to sleep, as Whimsicott finally takes a turn of paralysis, and the taunt ends for Whimsicott, and I just decided to protect Smeargle as Whimsicott gets up the Tailwind again, and Dragapult is still asleep, and Power Trip means that we can finally get rid of Whimsicott, which means that we have a much safer setup endgame with Corviknight. Now that we've gotten rid of all of the special attackers that can be in this game, we can kind of just trust Corviknight to finish up the game here. As we can bring back in Palmont, and they decide to swap in Incineroar, which we get to reflect the Intimidate back onto, and Mamoswine just goes for Earthquake, which takes out Palmont, but it also takes out their Incineroar, which I'm kind of fine with the trade at that point, as now we can start going for Iron Defenses. And the Dragapult is already shown to be Dragon Darts, so we can pretty safely assure that the Dragapult is pure physical. As they do knock our leftovers away, but we have the Roost, so it's not too much of a problem as they Ice Sharding with Mamoswine, and Dragapult finally wakes up, and Dragapult reveals it as Phantom Force, but we get to Body Press into Mamoswine, and since we're ×3 defense on Corviknight, the Dragapult just isn't doing anything to us, and we can pretty safely Roost here just in case, and now we can start going for the Power Trip into Dragapult, as we really don't need that extra Iron Defense boost. Like, if they crit us at this point, they crit us at this point, but the opponent understands that the chance of them critting us on the next Phantom Force is not good, and they just decide to end the battle there. Here we have some pretty fearsome special attackers in the Volcarona and the Glimmora, which can both really bully Corviknight, but they also have Clefable, and Clefable can be unaware, so another risk that we're having to play against this team here. They decide to flat out lead Volcarona and Rillaboom, and I decided to lead Excadrill and Smeargle, and I thought that me leading Excadrill would be enough for them to like Terra Volcarona turn one, since we could just Rock Slide with Excadrill, but I decided to protect Excadrill and then use Smeargle here, but they full on just decided to double into Smeargle, which was kind of a bit of a crazy play in my opinion, but this allows us to get in Palmont, as Excadrill is going to take Grassy Glide damage, and we can Nuzzle Volcarona to make it slower than Excadrill, because we did bring Hippowdon this game, so we can actually set up the Sand, but the Rock Slide is going to take out Volcarona, probably like it should have done last turn, and now they bring in Tauros, and they get down the Intimidate, and since there's two physical attackers on the field that Corviknight doesn't really care about, I just decided to swap in Corviknight so we can start getting it set up, and we can Coaching one time into Corviknight, but the Tauros is actually Mirror Herb, so it gets to copy our Coaching boost, which complicates things a little bit here. I just ripped the Terra Electric on Palmont, and Grassy Glide thankfully does not take out Palma, and we get to double shock the Tauros for some damage. They close combat Corviknight, and it does a pretty good amount, but it drops their defense here, which is pretty nice as we buff our defense. So the Tauros is only going to do less damage to us, and we can roost off the damage that we just took. They decide to Aqua Jet into Palma in order to get rid of it, which is perfectly fine by me, as they U-turn, and then they bring in the King Gambit as we roost to get all of our health back, and we land for the turn, and Corviknight is now at full health, thanks to its leftovers, as we can bring in Excadrill here, and it might have gotten a chance to live the Aqua Jet, but we protect this turn, hopefully taking the Aqua Jet into us. And Body Press is nearly enough to KO Tauros, but because of the grassy terrain recovery, Tauros is able to live. And they fake out into Corviknight so that they can get the free KO into Excadrill here. And now it is Corviknight versus the rest of the physical attackers on this team, as Tauros is going to protect just to stall out a turn, and they Grassy Glide into us, and we Body Press into them, and no real progress is made, but they Grassy Glide into us again, maybe going for that crit that would, I guess, do like an eighth of our health, but they close combat, and we don't get crit on this turn, and we get to crit them, actually, but the crit does not matter there, since they were lowering their defense with close combat, as they Grassy Glide again, and King Gambit can only Sucker Punch us to be faster than us, so we get to Body Press that slot for free, and I believe at this point, yeah, the opponent is willing to give up. Here we have a pretty unique spread of Mons, but most, I mean, half of them are special attackers, but Ceruledge is kind of difficult to deal with because we can't Body Press it, and Hisuian Zoroark adds a lot of questionability to what is actually on the field, and if the Armarouge is able to get out Trick Room, then we are definitely in a bad spot. But we're going to let this one play out, and we decide to lead Corviknight and Smeargle, and they decide to lead Garganacl and Toxtricity, which is a pretty good opening for us, because we can just go Terra Dragon on Corviknight to resist the Overdrive that's coming into the slot, and they immediately Terra Ghosted their Garganacl, which isn't too bad for us, because I decided to play super defensively here by going for the Decorate and the Body Press, so we're going to get Soul Cured, but Soul Cure isn't so much of a problem since we have Roost, and we're going to take the Overdrive from Toxtricity, and I just decided to go for the Power Trip in their Garganacl, but that's not going to do enough damage into it, and I tried to Soul Cure into Smeargle, perhaps, in order to deal enough damage into it, but we get to swap in Palma here, and Palma is going to resist the Overdrive as the Garganacl protects itself, and we get a free roost with Corviknight, putting us back up at a lot of health. And with Palma on the field, we can more reliably get more boost onto Corviknight for the Power Trip, which in Power Trip is going to keep doing some more damage, which it's definitely enough to KO Garganacl this turn. As Toxtricity, I believe, is Choice Scarf, because it was faster than Palma that last turn, as we saw, and Palma is super fast. And they do actually crit Corviknight here, which we can't be having any more of those, basically. But we get to Power Trip down the Armarouge, so they couldn't do anything. And King Gambit is, you know, it's open for taking a Body Press, but we faked out the Toxtricity, and we got to Roost Corviknight for free. Since our defense is so high, King Gambit should not be able to KO us. And they Sucker Punch Corviknight as they Overdrive both Mons, and they crit Smeargle there, which if they had crit Corviknight, they might have been able to KO Corviknight. But Corviknight is still hanging on, and we still have Hisuian Quillfish in the back, as they're still overdriving, and I'm just going to play it safe here I go for Destiny Bond because I think it might be a 2-co, and we're just roosting, but Overdrive is not a 2-co with the Choice Scarf, as we'll see. So Quillfish gets to live another turn, but it goes for the Acupressure, and it gives accuracy into Corviknight again, and I don't think I used Hisuian Quillfish after this, so Hisuian Quillfish is only increasing Corviknight's accuracy. Thank you, Hisuian Quillfish, but we get to Power Trip here into Toxtricity, and that is 110% going to take it out. Up next, we have a pretty solid bunch of Mons. They do, however, have Rotom Wash, which is known to carry Will-O-Wisp, and it's very hard for us to touch Rotom Wash on this team, since it is an electric type, but it is Levitate, so we can't use any of our ground types to get rid of it. The battle starts out here, and they immediately lead Rotom, which I'm not quite sure what to do about, so I just decided to bring in Hippowdon and protect Excadrill, hoping that Rotom isn't going to do anything too crazy here, and it does reveal the Will-O-Wisp on it, which it's not great for us. We had to use Excadrill and Hippowdon in order to try to get rid of this Rotom. I Iron Head the Rillaboom to try and deal some good damage into it, and they would hammer crit into Hippowdon, and I think that crit did matter, even though it was a super effective hit on grassy terrain. Hippowdon has a lot of defense, so hard to say there. I mean, I could calculate, but that sounds kind of lame. And now we're going to bring in Corviknight, and our only out for this game is getting Omega Lucky, so I decided to go for the Rock Slide, and we don't get it in for the burn this turn at least, as they just decided to Volt Switch out, so we get a free Iron Defense with Corviknight, and Rotom isn't currently on the field, so we can keep getting Corviknight set up for whenever Rotom returns, but Rillaboom's, gonna fake out into Corviknight here to get that free turn. But we Iron Head into Rillaboom, but that doesn't KO it, but the Sand is going to get Rillaboom, which is nice, and Corviknight takes that guaranteed flinch as we lose our leftovers, unfortunately. And they decided to bring Rotom back in here, but X-Control's faster, so I at least go for the Rock Slide, since getting the Rock Slide flinch would super help us out here. And we get the Body Press into Rotom, but now we kind of need either another flinch or for them to miss the Will-O-Wisp in order for Corviknight to assure up the end game here. And we Rock Slide both Mons, but they do get the Will-O-Wisp, but they miss the Will-O-Wisp, which means that Corviknight gets to Body Press into the Rotom, so this game isn't going to take absolutely forever. And they reveal Arcanine to be their last Mon, but I don't think, even if the Rotom did burn us here, I don't think the game would change too much, because we can just Iron Defense back out to being +6 and then Body Press absolutely everything here. And also we had a fourth Mon who we didn't even get to see. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Quillfish at this point, and if it was Quillfish, then we get to intimidate both of these two, probably. I mean, definitely Arcanine's a physical attacker, but Meganium's, based on the knockoff, I would assume it's a physical attacker, and Quillfish can at least side acupressure into Corviknight, which means that we can get Power Trip boost for these Mons, just in case we can't KO them with Body Press for whatever reason. Okay, here we have Rain, but they also have the Mouse and Hydreigon for the crits. And Hydreigon for the crits, we already don't have a lot of great ways to take special attacks on Corviknight, so it's a little risky if they bring Hydreigon. But I decide to lead Palmot and Smeargle here, and they just decide to lead Mousehold, and they immediately Terra Ghost, perhaps sussing out that we were going to go for the fake out, as they taunt into Smeargle, which gets rid of a lot of our moves, and we crit the Annihilate for like a fourth of its health there. We're going to bring in Hippowdon to hopefully get some good Sand Chip here as they follow me with Mousehold, and Double Shock is going to absolutely obliterate Mousehold as they Drain Punch with Annihilate, and that brings Annihilate's health up a little bit. But now they bring in Sinistcha, who heals Annihilate even more, and it's not looking so good, so I decided to bring in Corviknight. And I figure in order to KO the Sinistcha, we're probably going to need some Power Trip boost, so I decided to start coaching Corviknight just because it'll help it live Annihilate, since it only has one attack on it right now for the Rage Fist stacks. But they full on Drain Punch into Palma, and that does enough to KO it because of Sand. But actually, Palma lives on 1%, which is we get to coaching into Corviknight again, and they Life Dew with Sinistcha in order to get both their Pokemon back into full health. But now we're building up a lot of boost on Corviknight, and the defense is especially helpful for dealing with Annihilate, and I bring in Hippowdon here, and they're going to Machu Gotcha, and Hippowdon takes it pretty good, and Corviknight resists it, of course, but they actually burn Corviknight here, which is really bad, because, as we'll see in a second here, Hippowdon, we Power Trip into Sinistcha, which would have, done more, it would have done so much more damage to it, so we can easily 2-KO it, but now that Sinistcha has so much of its health back, it's going to be a much more problematic to remove, but we get to at least Whirlwind out Annihilate, so that gets rid of its boost. And I'm protecting Hippowdon because I really don't want Sinistcha to get the Machu Gotcha into it to make Sinistcha even harder to KO. And we have to Power Trip again, but Sinistcha lives on its berry this time, so we're going to have to Power Trip into it again as they try to Draco Meteor into Corviknight, and they get the crit because they're currently critical boosted. And Sinistcha is able to get the Machu Gotcha, which means that it heals up enough health from hitting Hippowdon here, and we try Power Tripping into it again with Corviknight, and we Whirlwind out the Hydreigon here just to get rid of its critical boost, and Hippowdon is going to faint due to the burn, and I figured they might want to Drain Punch Smeargle, and they do that, so we get the Protect off, and Corviknight's just roosting in order to help live the turn, and Hydreigon is gonna go for a Draco Meteor here, which procs Smeargle's Sash, which is good because we really don't want Annihilate getting the Drain Punch, as we get to put Hydreigon to sleep here, so we can at least deal with that a little bit easier. Body Press would have KO'd Corviknight, would have KO'd Hydreigon without the burn, and at this point, I know the only way that we're getting out of this is if we can get Corviknight to do enough Power Trip damage to Annihilate, so I don't bother putting Annihilate to sleep here. And we're max defense with Corviknight, and Annihilate has started bulking up. I go for the Power Trip into it, and the Power Trip does a little bit less than a third of Annihilate's health, so again, the burn would have made it so that we could just 2-KO Annihilate here, but because of the burn, we're just not super likely to win the game here. Hydreigon is going to wake up, and it's going to go for Dark Pulse into us, but I decided to Power Trip into Hydreigon
in order to get rid of it, and Sinistcha is going to get to return to the field to heal up Annihilape, since we weren't able to KO it with the power trips before. And Annihilape is going to go for bulk up one more time, and Sinistcha is still faster than Corviknight here, so it gets to go for the Life Dew, fully healing up Annihilape. And power trips is able to critical hit Sinistcha there, but based on the damage that we were doing before and the fact that now we have so many more stat boosts than we did before, I don't think the crit mattered there. But Annihilape is going to finally go for the Rage Fist, and it does just enough damage to KO us in 2 hits, so we need to get... Oh, wait, actually, the Rage Fist was boosted in power because we just hit it with the power trip, so they were able to KO us on the next one, but we would have needed to crit the Annihilape there to win. So yeah, we didn't win this battle, but I feel like this is a prime battle to show why you really can't afford for Corviknight to be burned, because when Corviknight gets burned and cuts half your damage, it's just bad. And lastly, this game is kind of against a mirror because they have the Corviknight, but they also have the Tyranitar and Garchomp for the sand. And there, Incineroar, Primarina, and Amoonguss, you know, it's definitely better than our Hisuian, Quillfish, Smeargle, and Palmot. So let's see how this one plays out. We decided to lead Corviknight and Palmot here, and they decided to lead their own Corviknight and Garchomp. And they immediately swap out Corviknight, and we double shock because I don't want Palmot to be an electric type anymore with Garchomp on the field. Corviknight's gonna get off a free Iron Defense, and Garchomp is just protecting itself because it doesn't want to take any extra damage. As I'm getting Corviknight set up, because we don't want... It's gonna have a max physical attack, and the only thing that can really threaten it at this point is Primarina. And I tried nuzzling into the Amoonguss just to maybe get a paralysis, but it kind of reveals that it's Covert Cloak here, as we now get to bring in Hippowdon for the sand, and we're just waiting for Corviknight to wake up here, as Hippowdon is going to protect so that it doesn't get put to sleep this turn. And Corviknight is able to wake up and body press into Primarina, and that's going to be enough to 2-KO with the sand, so they decide to redirect with Amoonguss here, but we crit the Amoonguss with the power trip, which is pretty nice. Primarina is just trying to go for the offense, and Scorching Sands is pretty close to picking a KO into Amoonguss here. And they decide not to switch out Amoonguss to get the Regenerator on the next turn. They're just okay with Amoonguss getting knocked out. And I did debate just protecting and roosting with Corviknight here. But because Corviknight is faster than Primarina, we're going to be super easy able to body press that spot. And their own Corviknight is trying to get set up, but their Corviknight is a little bit late at this point. As we can just use Hippowdon to yawn into the Corviknight, and that's going to keep it down for quite a while. As Garchomp re-hits the field, and they get to Earthquake into just Hippowdon, but as Hippowdon is super physical tanky, so it lives the attack, and we get to eat our Aguav Berry, as Hippowdon is also going to make drowsy Garchomp here. Then I swap in Smeargle since Garchomp has to do something, but Smeargle has a Focus Sash, so it's always going to live the turn. And now both Pokemon are going to be asleep, so we can start using Smeargle in order to decorate into Corviknight, which guarantees our Power Trip endgame against the opposing Corviknight, because we can build up our Power Trip faster than they can bulk up to build up their probably Body Press. And at this point, the opponent realizes that our Corviknight who's already set up versus their Corviknight who's currently asleep and not set up is not going to be good for them, so they just decide to forfeit. So yeah, super interesting batch of games there. I feel like we did go up against a lot of physical attackers there, but that's where Corviknight shines the best, is against physical attackers. And you could maybe swap out some Pokemon on this team to deal with more special attackers as time goes on and as the meta shifts, but I think Corviknight is a really staple Pokemon here because of its ability to just body press and power trip pretty much everything that's in the format right now. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video and even consider subscribing, because both of those things help me out an absolute ton. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.